a cold, desolate stretch of Interstate 45 in East Texas. The night of Halloween, 1980, was fading into morning. The darkness was thick, swallowing the pine trees of the Sam Houston National Forest. Travelers on this highway were usually long-distance truckers or people rushing home after holiday celebrations. None of them could have imagined that this specific stretch of asphalt would soon become the center of a 41-year investigation. A truck driver pulled over to the side of the highway near Huntsville, Texas, just past the tree line, in the tall grass of a roadside ditch. He saw something unusual, a shape that didn't belong in the landscape. He stepped out of his vehicle into the damp morning air, walking closer to investigate. An unimaginable tragedy had unfolded there. A young girl had been left in the dirt, her life cruelly taken from her. The scene was deeply unsettling to the truck driver, who rushed to contact local authorities. When Walker County Sheriff's deputies arrived, they documented a crime of immense brutality. The victim was young, likely a teenager, and had suffered a severe fatal assault. The person responsible had taken everything that could identify her. There was no purse, no identification, and no personal belongings left at the scene. They had systematically stripped her of her identity, leaving only a smoky blue glass pendant on a gold-colored chain around her neck, and a pair of red leather sandals nearby. These two items were the only clues left behind in the dirt. For 41 years, she was known only as the Walker County Jane Doe, a ghost in the Texas criminal justice system. Dozens of investigators tried to unlock her identity. Generations of detectives passed her file from one desk to another. Millions of internet sleuths memorized her haunting forensic sketches, wondering who she was and who was missing her. But every single lead eventually ended in complete silence, until a specialized laboratory decoded the highly degraded genetic fragments she left behind and uncovered a reality far more heartbreaking than anyone had ever imagined. Tonight, we decode the tragic case of Sherri Ann Jarvis. To truly understand the depth of this tragedy, we have to look back at the final hours. She was seen alive. Halloween night, October 31st, 1980. The small city of Huntsville, Texas, was active with teenagers and families celebrating the evening. But away from the town center near the highway, the atmosphere was different. It was transit territory populated by travelers, truckers, and strangers passing through. Sometime during the late evening hours, a young teenager walked into a South End Gulf gas station located just off Interstate 45. She was completely alone. She was thousands of miles away from her actual home, though no one in that store knew it at the time. To the workers, she was simply another traveler looking for help. Witnesses inside the gas station described her as wearing a yellow pullover shirt and blue jeans. Oddly, she was carrying her red leather high-heeled sandals in her hands, rather than wearing them. She appeared calm but focused. She approached the counter and asked the clerk for directions. But her question deeply confused the station staff. She was looking for the Ellis Prison Unit. This was a maximum security state penitentiary located several miles north of the town, hidden deep within a rural area. It was an incredibly unusual destination for a young girl, walking alone in the middle of the night. The workers wondered why a teenager would be searching for a facility housing some of the state's most dangerous offenders at that hour. The girl engaged in a brief conversation with the employees and a few customers. She mentioned that a truck driver had offered her a ride, but she had declined it because she didn't trust him. She claimed she was supposed to meet up with a friend who was waiting for her elsewhere. After receiving vague directions to the highway layout, she thanked the clerk, walked out of the glass doors, and vanished into the dark Texas night. Less than 6 hours later, around 9:20 a.m. on November 1st, the tragic discovery was made by a passing motorist who had pulled over along the interstate. The location was just a few miles away from the gas station where she had asked for directions. The medical examiner would later estimate that her life was taken at approximately 3:20 a.m. This meant the fateful encounter occurred just hours, perhaps even minutes, after she walked out of that gas station store. When Walker County investigators secured the area along Interstate 45, they quickly realized they were facing a massive forensic wall. The crime scene provided very little physical evidence beyond the victim's body itself. The killer had chosen an isolated dark stretch of the highway where there were no surveillance cameras, no witnesses, and no lighting. The official findings detailed by the medical examiner revealed a terrifying level of hostility inflicted upon the young victim. She had suffered severe physical trauma across her upper body, indicating a violent struggle in her final moments. The forensic examination confirmed she had been subjected to an incredibly brutal assault, resulting in devastating injuries. The official cause of death was determined to be forced asphyxiation. The perpetrator had used a piece of clothing to violently end her life, leaving it behind at the scene. Detectives immediately launched a massive identification campaign. They checked local missing person reports across Texas and neighboring states. They ran her fingerprints through federal databases but found no matches. They published her dental records in medical journals, hoping a dentist somewhere would recognize the work. Nothing worked. No family members came forward, and no one seemed to be looking for a missing teenager fitting her description in the state of Texas. In January 1981, with all investigative leads completely exhausted, the county was forced to bury her. She was laid to rest in a donated plot at Oakwood Cemetery in Huntsville. Her tombstone bore no name, only a case number and a cold title, Unknown White Female. For decades, she remained a nameless mystery. The file was moved to the cold case unit where it sat for a generation. The community of Huntsville never forgot the girl on the highway, but as the years became decades, the chances of identifying her seemed to dwindle to zero. She was a ghost from 1980, frozen in time. Cases like this require a community that refuses to let the truth fade away. If you believe these stories deserve to be remembered with dignity, please take a second to leave a like on this video. It helps others find these investigations. To stay with us on this journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter. Your support is what keeps these files open. The turning point for the Walker County Jane Doe did not happen overnight. It required a systematic, modern reinvestigation led by individuals who refused to let the case be forgotten. In 2015, Detective Tom Bean took over the cold case unit at the Walker County Sheriff's Office. He inherited dozens of unsolved files, but the 1980 homicide of the unidentified teenager immediately stood out to him. He recognized that the original investigators had done excellent work given the technology of their era. But 40 years of scientific advancement had created tools they couldn't have imagined. Detective Bean began by re-examining every single piece of physical evidence preserved in the property room. He looked at the original crime scene photographs, the autopsy notes, and the clothing items. He knew that the key to solving the case layout rested entirely on discovering her true identity. If they could find out who she was, they could understand her final movements, her social circle, and potentially who had a motive to hurt her. However, there was a major obstacle. The original DNA samples collected during the 1980 autopsy had been preserved using formalin and embedded in paraffin wax blocks. For decades, this was standard medical practice for preserving tissue samples. But to modern geneticists, formalin is a destructive chemical that breaks DNA strands into microscopic, unreadable fragments. Multiple traditional laboratories attempted to extract a usable profile from these samples, but they all failed. The genetic material was simply too old and too damaged. In 2020, Detective Bean made a crucial decision to partner with Othram, a specialized genomic laboratory located in the Woodlands, Texas. Othram did not operate like standard forensic labs used by the FBI or state police. They specialized in forensic genetic genealogy, a process that reads hundreds of thousands of genetic markers instead of the standard 20 markers used in traditional police databases. They were built specifically to handle highly degraded, chemically damaged DNA from historical cold cases. The scientists at Othram spent months working on the Walker County sample, using advanced chemical extraction methods designed to remove the destructive formalin. They managed to reconstruct enough of the genetic sequence to build a comprehensive profile. Once the profile was complete, they didn't upload it to CODIS at the police database. Instead, they uploaded it to public genealogical databases like GED Match and Family Tree DNA, where millions of ordinary citizens upload their DNA to find their ancestors. The genealogical research was an intricate, painstaking process. Othram's team of genetic genealogists began mapping out the distant relatives who shared microscopic segments of DNA with the unidentified girl. They found third and fourth cousins scattered across the American Midwest. From there, they had to build a massive family tree backward in time to find a common ancestor, and then trace that ancestor's descendants forward to the present day. As the family tree expanded, the researchers focused on a specific family lineage originating from Minnesota. They discovered a branch of the family that had suddenly lost contact with a teenage daughter in the late 1970s. The timeline aligned perfectly. Detective Bean contacted local law enforcement in Minnesota to verify the information and locate immediate family members who could provide a direct reference sample. They located a sibling who confirmed that their sister had run away from home in 1980 and had never been heard from again. The family had spent 41 years wondering if she was alive, if she had started a new life under a different name, or if something terrible had happened to her. A direct DNA swab was collected from the sibling and rushed back to the lab for a final definitive comparison. The results were conclusive. The match was perfect. After 41 years of total anonymity, the Walker County Jane Doe officially received her name back. She was Sherri Ann Jarvis. She was only 14 years old when she was murdered along that Texas highway, not 16 or 18 as originally estimated by the medical examiner. She was a child who had slipped through the cracks of society. Now that the team had a name, the investigation could finally shift from identifying a body to tracking a killer. Detective Bean and his team began reconstructing the actual life of Sherri Ann Jarvis. She was born in 1966 in Minnesota. Her family described her as a vibrant, loving child who enjoyed animals, music, and spending time with her siblings. But as she entered her early teenage years, her life became increasingly turbulent. Due to behavioral struggles and difficulties at home, Sherri was removed from her family's custody by the state of Minnesota. She was placed into a residential foster care facility in the city of Stillwater. To a 14-year-old girl, the structure felt confining. In the spring of 1980, Sherri made a decision that would alter her destiny forever. She climbed out of a window and ran away from the facility. For months, Sherri lived on the margins of society. Without money, a stable home, or adult guidance, she relied on the dangerous culture of hitchhiking to travel across the country. In 1980, hitchhiking was deeply embedded in American youth culture, seen as a symbol of freedom. But for a runaway teenager, it was a gauntlet of immense danger. Sherri managed to travel over 1,500 miles from the cold landscapes of Minnesota all the way down to the humid pine forests of East Texas. During her time on the run, Sherri made one final attempt to communicate with her family. She sent a brief letter to her mother, stating that she was okay, that she was in Texas, and that she intended to return home someday when things settled down. The letter carried no return address and no specific location details. It was the last time her voice was ever recorded. Her family kept that letter for decades, hoping every time the phone rang that it would be Sherri calling to say she was coming home. With the biographical details established, investigators returned to the events of Halloween night, 1980, with a completely new perspective. We now know that the girl who walked into the South End Gulf Station was not an independent traveler. She was a terrified 14-year-old runaway who was completely lost in a dangerous environment. Her behavior that night began to make sense to modern detectives. Why was she asking for directions to the Ellis Prison Unit? This question had baffled investigators for 40 years. The Ellis Unit was a high-security prison, not a place a teenage tourist would visit. Modern theory suggests that Sherri may have known someone incarcerated there, perhaps an older acquaintance she had met on the road, or a family connection she was desperately trying to locate. Alternatively, she may have simply been given false information by a driver who told her she could find shelter or assistance near that facility. Her statement to the gas station clerk that a truck driver had offered her a ride, but she had declined because she didn't trust him, indicates she was trying to be cautious. She was aware of the danger surrounding her. Yet within hours of leaving that store, her defenses failed. The weather was dropping, the highway was pitch black, and she was exhausted. Investigators believe she eventually accepted a ride from the wrong person, someone who saw her vulnerability and decided to exploit it. The forensic evidence suggests the crime did not happen where her body was found. The lack of blood and signs of a prolonged struggle in the immediate roadside ditch led detectives to believe she was assaulted and murdered inside a vehicle or at a secondary location. The killer then drove her lifeless body to the edge of the Sam Houston National Forest, stripped her of her clothes to destroy any trace evidence, and rolled her into the ditch, leaving only the blue pendant and the red sandals as a final silent testament to her presence. The identification of Sherri Ann Jarvis in 2021 was a massive victory for forensic science, but it was only half of the equation. The homicide investigation remains wide open. The Walker County Sheriff's Office, alongside the Texas Rangers and the FBI, immediately transitioned into a full-scale hunt for her killer. The individual responsible for this brutality has evaded justice for over 4 decades. Investigators began reviewing suspects who were active along the Interstate 45 corridor in 1980. This specific highway has a notorious history, often referred to by criminologists as a hunting ground for several serial offenders during the late 20th century. Detectives cross-referenced commercial trucking logs, prison employment records from the Ellis Unit, and arrest records for sexual offenders in the region during October and November of 1980. One specific avenue of investigation involves analyzing the DNA profile of the suspect. Although the victim's DNA was highly degraded, Othram and law enforcement also possessed biological material belonging to the perpetrator, recovered from the preserved evidence kits. This male DNA profile has been uploaded into national criminal databases, but so far it has yielded no direct matches. This means the killer may have never been arrested for a qualifying violent crime after 1980, or he may have died before modern DNA databases were established. Law enforcement holds on to the hope that the killer is still alive today. If he was in his early 20s in 1980, he would be in his 60s or 70s now, potentially living an ordinary life as a grandfather or retiree in some quiet suburb, carrying the dark secret of what he did on Halloween night 46 years ago. The announcement of Sherri's identification was intended to send a clear message to this individual. The clock is ticking and science is catching up. Perhaps the most emotional aspect of this entire breakthrough was the resolution it brought to a small Texas town and a distant family in Minnesota. For 41 years, the citizens of Huntsville had cared for the grave of the unknown white female. Local residents frequently visited the plot, leaving flowers, holiday decorations, and toys, ensuring that even though she was nameless, she was never unloved. Following the identification, the Jarvis family released a public statement expressing their profound gratitude to Detective Tom Bean, the Othram Laboratory, and the community of Huntsville. They stated that while the news was devastating, it finally ended the agonizing decades of uncertainty. They chose to leave her body resting in the Oakwood Cemetery, but they replaced the cold, generic tombstone with a beautiful new monument that proudly bears her true name, Sherri Ann Jarvis. The case stands as a powerful monument to the importance of cold case advocacy. It reminds us that no victim is too obscure, no case is too old, and no evidence is too damaged to be solved. Sherri's story represents thousands of other unidentified individuals whose files are currently gathering dust in police storage rooms across the world, waiting for the right combination of human determination and scientific breakthrough to bring them home. Some mysteries remain unsolved because the world chooses to look away. Others are solved because a select few refuse to give up on the truth. More than 45 years after a 14-year-old girl walked out of a Texas gas station and into the darkness, the world finally knows her name. The legend of the Walker County Jane Doe has faded, replaced by the real, heartbreaking memory of Sherri Ann Jarvis. The investigation into who took her life continues. Every week, new tips are evaluated and new genetic connections are explored. The silence of the Sam Houston National Forest may hold the secret for now, but history has proven that the truth has a way of fighting its way to the surface, no matter how much time has passed. If you believe in separating documented evidence from myth, and if you want to ensure that stories like Sherri's are never forgotten, consider subscribing to Evil Decoded. Every week we dig deep into history's darkest cold cases, because sometimes the real story is much more disturbing than the legend.